Yo, what's up everyone? Patrick here, welcome back, and moving on to another counting example. So in NYC, the east to west roads are called streets, the north to south roads are avenues. And then how many roads are, and we have 4 questions here. So number 1, strictly between 11th and 94th Street. Number 2, the number of rows that end in 4 from all of the rows that we find in number 1. Number 3 are strictly inside the rectangle formed by 2nd Avenue, 12th Street, 10th Avenue, and 104th Street. And then number 4 is all of the roads from number 3 that end in 2. So starting with number 1, strictly between 11th and 94th Street. Now you got to be careful here with this strictly between. So what I'm going to do is actually start with smaller numbers. So let's say that the question was asking how many numbers are strictly between 3 and 7. Now you got to be careful because you wouldn't subtract these. The answer would not be 4 because they're asking strictly in between them. So it's not inclusive of the ends. So if we write out the numbers, notice 4, 5, 6, and then 7. So how many numbers are there strictly between 3 and 7? Well, there's 3 numbers, not 4. And so really what it is you subtract these 2, but then you have to subtract 1 always as well. So you don't include that end value. Because when you do 7 minus 3, it's asking how many numbers are, how many times you have to count up to that end value. So notice 1, 2, 3, 4. But that's not what they're asking when they're asking strictly between. You got to be careful with the wording. So it would always be this minus that minus 1. So if we apply that pattern here, it wouldn't be 94 minus 11. It would be 94 minus 11 minus 1. And that would give us 82. So that's the answer to number 1. Right? There are 82 roads between 11th and 94th Street. Now, out of all of those roads in number 1, how many end in 4? And so what we would do, notice that we got 11, and then we have 94. So how many end in 4? So notice we'd have 14, there's 1, 24, 34, 44, 54, 64, 74, 84, and then notice that we're not including the 94 because it's strictly between 11 and 94. So the 94 wouldn't be included in that count there. So how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the answer to number 2 is 8. And then number 3, let me write out the answer here. So with number 3, what would happen is they're asking how many roads are strictly inside the rectangle formed by 2nd Avenue, 12th Street, 10th Avenue, and 104th Street. So what would happen here is if we draw a rectangle, and then let's say, so the east to west roads are called streets. So the streets would be 12th to 104th Street. So let's say this is 12th Street here, right? And then this is 104th Street, right there. And then we'll have 2nd Avenue to 10th Avenue. So let's say this here is 2nd Avenue, and then this here ends up being 10th Avenue. Let me put the 12 maybe over here, and the 104 over here. Right, so they're asking how many roads are inside, strictly inside this rectangle. So it's not going to be inclusive of these roads on the outside. So what we can do is we could find out the number of roads, the number of streets here, right, between 12th and 104, and then the number of avenues. Here, we could count all of those. So to count the number of streets inside this rectangle, so strictly between 104 and 1012 would be that same pattern, 104 minus 12 minus 1. So that would be what? 92 minus 1, so that would give us 91. So there are 91 streets strictly between 12th Street and 104th Street. And then the number of avenues would be, same thing, strictly between 2nd Avenue and 10th Avenue, it would be 10 minus 2 minus 1, which would give us 7. And so then you just add those numbers, 91 plus 7 would give us 98. So that's what the answer would be to number 3. Right? So you got to be really careful when you see this strictly in between wording. And then number 4 is asking from those roads in number 3, so all these roads inside this rectangle, how many end in 2? So how many end in 2? So if we start with the streets, notice it's definitely not going to be the 12. That's not going to be included. Even though it ends in 2, remember it's strictly in between 12 and 104. So the 12 wouldn't be included, so it would be what? 22, 32, 42, etc., all the way to 102, like that. So we got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like that. And so the number there would be what? It would be 9, right? 22, 32, 42, 52, 62, that's 5, 72, 82, 92, 102. So that would be 9. So there would be 9 streets that end in 2 between 12th Street, that's strictly in between 12th Street and 104th Street. And then the number of avenues between 2nd Avenue and 10th Avenue that end in 2, notice that there's actually going to be 0. Because from 2 to 10, it would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This one ends in 2, but we're not counting that one. It has to be in between. Then notice how none of those end in 2. So it's actually just the streets that we would count, and the answer would be 9 for number 4. Right? So with these kinds of questions, be careful with the wording. This strictly in between. You don't just subtract those 2 endpoints. You also have to subtract the 1.